Hey guys, and welcome to Petrol Ped. Now behind me is an all-electric Lexus, the RZ450e. A snappy name, I know, but I honestly think it's a really interesting car. It is super comfortable, and let's face it, it's got really edgy looks. Now then, it's safe to say that Lexus like their funky colour schemes. They also like their complicated model names. Earlier this year, I had the RX450h plug-in hybrid, and that was in Sonic Copper. If you've not seen that video, I'll put a link above right now. It was a really cool looking car, very edgy, and the colour scheme, well, it was a bit out there. This bitone colour, it's in what's called Aether Blue and Black. This RZ450e is an all-electric Lexus, and it actually shares the same underpinnings as the Toyota BZ4X, another really easy to remember model name. Now, I had a BZ4X to drive back end of last year during the winter. I didn't actually do a video on it, but one of the things that was quite disappointing about that car was the range, especially in cold weather conditions. Now, I know Toyota have done a big update on the battery management system of that car to improve the range, but hopefully this car doesn't suffer the same problem. We'll talk more about the battery and the motors and so on a little bit later, but styling wise, I quite like the dual tone colours. It's a bit, I guess it's a bit kind of Bugatti Veyron-ish because they've got this kind of bitone colour. I know this isn't a Bugatti Veyron, but when it arrived and was parked outside, I thought, that reminds me of something. But yeah, Bugatti Veyron. Front end, very shark nose-like. It also looks a little bit like the Robert De Niro character in The Shark's Tale. Bear with me, Google it and you'll see exactly what I mean. But I like the front end, it's very edgy. Let's wander around the back, because the back's got some quite interesting styling cues. And we'll have a quick look at boot space, then I want to talk to you about the four-wheel drive platform. Now, the rear styling does look quite like the RX450h. It's got these two kind of spikes coming out the back. I'm presuming that's some kind of aero device. And then the black two-tone goes into privacy glass. And I think it does look quite cool from the back. The big question is, can you fit two dogs in the boot? Let's find out, shall we? Yeah, of course you can. How's the back? Is there plenty of room? They haven't been. Darcy's laying down already. Yeah, the boot's a good size. There's I guess that's probably like a 60-40 split in the rear seats. Plenty of space. But what I do like, let me just get these two out. If you want to have a play, I have to lift the old girl out. Look, is I had to take the parcel shelf out so that they bonk the girls on the head. But in here is some underfloor storage, and here is the parcel shelf. And what's really quite cool about it is it folds in half, so it's really easy to put back in. I guess it needs to go upside down that way, and there we go, it's back in again. Super easy. And then under here you've got your charge cables. There's a nice big underfloor portion. In fact, you can actually remove that if you wanted to put that at the back. You can do that. You could do that and literally just put it down the back. Loads and loads of space. I like that a lot. Now, question is, how big's the front boot? Because the rear one, yeah, ticks lots of boxes. So let's check out the front boot, see what the luggage space is like. There isn't any luggage space. Doesn't have a front boot. It's full of motors and battery management systems and so on, which is a bit disappointing, to be honest. So we have a 71.4 kilowatt hour battery, and this is a four-wheel drive car. The front axle has a 201 horsepower motor. The rear axle has a 107 horsepower motor with a combined 309 horsepower. Not quite sure where the extra couple came from. And the four-wheel drive system's actually been designed by Subaru, so I'll be quite interested. It's got some quite trick things in terms of torque distribution and so on when you're on it, when you're driving along. Now, range-wise, now whether or not you believe WLTP, but the WLTP figure is 270 miles on a full charge. That I've never ever seen a car get anywhere near WLTP. So we'll talk about it when we're out on the road. I reckon sort of between 200 and 250, depending on temperature and driving characteristics and so on. Performance is pretty good. 0 to 60 is just a smidge over 5 seconds, and it's limited to 99 miles an hour. So it's not a top-end fast car. So it's an interesting proposition. Let's jump on the inside because it's a Lexus. It might not have a front boot, but boy, do Lexus do nice interiors, and the technology on the inside is really very special. It's lovely, in fact. Could have done with a strut rather than a clip, though. Now, before we jump in the front, let's do the all-important gangly leg ped test. Loads of room in here. This seat's all the way back for me. Big, long legs. Very, very comfortable. I've got heated seats in the back. I've got USB-C chargers. I've got a proper 3-pin power socket to plug stuff in. It's lovely. And then I've got 2 of these opaque glass panoramic roofs, and you can kind of change the colour or the opacity of the roof to let more or less light in. I really like that. It gives the car a really airy feel, and it's really nice. And then the trim spec of this car, these seats just feel and look lovely. Very, very comfortable. Now, I've got to say, Lexus do make a quality interior. Let me just bring the car to life. So it's got the comfort entry, so your seat goes back, your steering wheel goes back to get in and out of the car, and then you've got electronically programmable seats. Pretty standard stuff nowadays, I know, but the driving position's very good. What I love is the quality feel of the materials in here. You've got this lovely kind of wood effect around the controls for the gears. This gear selector is actually quite nice. You kind of have to push it down to rotate it to get reverse or drive, or just push it down to get neutral. All I would say is there's obviously a big touchscreen. It's an EV, right? So there's going to be quite a lot of touchscreen. The air conditioning or climate controls are on 2 rotational dials there, so they're super easy to get on and off. And then the main screen is a really nice, very clear screen. It supports Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, which is a good thing. But yeah, it's a really nice quality interior. Let's go for a drive because there are things I really like about this car, and there are a few things that would drive me absolutely mad if I owned it. Before we go out driving, I do want to talk about these drive modes, and I'm going to use my camera phone just to help out a little bit. So you can see here on the screen I've got normal, sport, eco, range and custom. Let me talk about those one at a time. So normal mode, I've had the car charging on my 7 kilowatt charger, and I'm currently showing 193 miles of range. That's nowhere near the 270, right? If I put it into sport mode, firstly the display changes slightly, but the estimated range stays at 193 miles. I'm now going to press the eco mode button. So if we go back here so you can see it change, if it does, in eco mode, that's now I've got an extra 7 miles of range. It's now gone up to 200 miles. And then finally, this car has a range mode. So you can see range mode just here. Range mode basically shuts off the aircon. Now you might be able to hear the aircon maybe. Aircon's turned off. Super quiet in here now, and the range has gone up to 244 miles. Now, it's the end of the day, it's cooling off, but on a hot day, I don't want to be driving around with the aircon off. I want to be driving around in sport mode. 193 miles. So let's take the car out onto the road. I can put this on the wireless charge map, which is just down there. It's quite nice. And see, just go through those drive modes. But range, it is only a just over 70 kilowatt hour battery pack. So it needs to be efficient. It needs to be running at in excess of 3 miles per kilowatt hour, really, to get anywhere near that kind of estimated 250 miles of range. So let's take it out for a drive and see how it gets on. So we're starting off the driving part of the review in sport mode. As I mentioned already, my range is showing 194 miles, which I don't think is great really, because the outside air temperature today is 21 degrees. And my fundamental problem I have at the moment with the car industry generally, especially the electric side of things, is all we do is quote WLTP figures. And I mentioned already, I've never got anywhere near those. And I really do think we need to start, and by we I really mean the manufacturers and the salespeople working for the manufacturers, start quoting what the real world range is going to be. Because this car, it isn't 250, 260, 270 miles. It's just not. Which I think is a great shame. And I think the solutions are, I guess, a bigger battery pack, but that adds weight and cost and those types of things, or more efficiency. But at the moment, I struggle with that amount of range to just have this car as a proposition. But I want to put that to one side. Just very briefly about charging. The car will support rapid charging up to 150 kilowatts. And the really interesting stat that Lexus quote is that they guarantee that the battery efficiency after 10 years will still be 90%. But in normal mode, this car, it lifts its skirt, it's pretty sprightly, and the most important thing about this car is it is so smooth and so quiet and so refined, just like any Lexus really. Now, you may well hear that. I've done that just on purpose, because actually if I have my Waze on, GPS speed and rated speed on here, it has the same annoying feature that the Lexus RX450h had that I have had recently. If you go over the speed limit, even by a couple of miles an hour, it starts to bong at you. It's very annoying. Okay, another thing this car does is it watches you. It's got a couple of scanners just above the steering wheel there, scanning you. And if you're not paying attention, even to the point where if you're not looking down the road, if I start looking to one side, it will kind of, there we go, it will start to bong and say, driver attention, you're not looking at the road where you're going. And it's brilliant, kind of probably would get on your wick after a while. Now, let's go to sport mode. I'm now in a 60, so I should be able to. So, in sport mode, the car's pickup, the way it drives it is quite different. It's got that instant torque of any EV, and it is quite punchy. I don't think this car's really set up to be a sports EV, but it does get down the road really well, and it's got a very nice, competent feeling on the road. The suspension is really good at absorbing all the bumps and the lumps, and it's the kind of car that you want to sit in and do some miles. It's got very comfortable seats, great driving position, really great visibility, and you know, if you do want to push on a little bit, it'll do it for you really, really nicely. Now clearly, as soon as you start to do that, let me just lift off, it's not too much regenerative braking or one pedal braking in just that normal mode, but I've got some paddles on the back of the steering wheel, and I can adjust the amount of regen braking using the paddles. I've got a little indicator now on the head-up display showing that I've got maximum regen happening when I lift off, and that's quite nice actually. It's not as aggressive as a lot of EVs. It's there. I'm on maximum now. If I now use the plus paddle and just take that off a little bit, it backs it off. So as you're driving, if you want to engage with the regen a little bit more, rather than having to either go into a B mode or go into some kind of drive mode on the gear selector, you've just got some paddles. but you might get in the car and go, whoa, hold on a minute, I've got change-up paddles. They look just like gear shifters in an automatic piston car, but they're not. They're regen braking. The really weird one is, though, to increase regen braking, you actually push the negative sign paddle, and that increases your regen braking, and to let it off, you hit the positive one. Brake feels really nice. Clearly you're doing a lot of regen, and then it's got a lot of push and a lot of go. I like it a lot. Now, last of the modes I want to just try. So at the moment, I've not been driving very long, so I'm pretty much at full battery. I'm showing 187 miles in sport mode. If I go into eco mode, that mileage has now gone to 191, so it doesn't really give you a great deal. My dash has changed slightly, and to be honest, the throttle pedal feel hasn't changed that much. It's still quite sprightly. Now clearly it's an EV, so it's got some mass to it, this car, but actually it doesn't feel too heavy on the road. The steering weight is quite nice. That compliance in the suspension is just super. The ride quality is really, really good. Doesn't wallow too much. And when you come off the brake, it's quite nice actually, because you still got a little bit of regen in there. So you come off the brake, and it's almost retarding a little. It's a bit like trail braking into a corner on a racetrack. So the last mode I just want to talk about is this range mode. I want to know what it feels like on the pedal to drive, because my range has now gone up to 227 miles. From when I was in sport mode, it was 182. So it does give you quite a bit of extra range, sort of an extra 40 odd miles or so. But what it does is it turns the climate control off. And it's quite warm today. So I'm not sure how I feel about that, to be honest. And then there's a custom mode where you can go in and you can basically set all the things that you want yourself. Put a smile on your face, that. So as I tune into the Drive Talk podcast, I hope you're all listening to the Drive Talk podcast. It's going really well so far. Joe, me and Pat are enjoying making it, and we're getting some great feedback, so that's all good. But my final impressions on this car, it's a really difficult one. There's many things I like about this car. I really quite like the looks. Even the bitone paintwork has grown on me over the week I've had the car. And it's a very comfortable, very smooth, very mature place to sit. It really has a mature ride. It's quite a wafter, this car. My challenge with it is not to do with performance. It's quick enough. Not to do with the ride quality and comfort. My challenge is at the price point of around about 75,000 quid. It's up against some really good EVs, and the range for me just isn't good enough, and I can't wrap it up. I can't, and I know it's not always about range, and I know people get hung up about range, but really on a warm summer's day, on a full charge, this car should be sat at 250 miles before you start your journey. It should be, and really you want it a bit more than that, because I know what will happen in the winter when it gets cold. You're going to be struggling to do 150 miles in this car, I think. And that's unfortunate, because there's so many other things about the car that are really, really good. The interior is beautiful. I can't convey other than saying it's nice. The feel of this steering wheel in your hand is lovely. It's got this beautiful soft leather feel to it. And the quality of the instrumentation, this big screen's very responsive. I know it's a lot of touch screen, but it's an electric car. We get used to that. But it's very easy to get to. And, I love the feel of a Lexus. I just think it needs to sort its life out in terms of range, which is a great shame. But yeah, I'd love to know what your thoughts are. It's one of these really interesting ones. It's just It's close, but no cigar. For me, I'm afraid, this car. Anyway, I'm going to draw that video to a close. If you enjoyed that, please give me a thumbs up. Comments below are always welcome. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to Petrol Ped for plenty more content to come. And I'll see you on the next film, guys. You take care. Drive safe.